Joining us next from my own native Carrickmacross in County Monaghan is resilience and leadership coach Lisa Nolan of Aslan Coaching. And Lisa's going to talk now about managing uncertainty, overcoming our fears and embracing change.
Thanks, Anya. Yes, indeed. You know, like many people on here today, I'm sure I have an inner critic that has a lot to say. So she has her own opinions and she isn't a bit shy about sharing them with me. So when I was given the opportunity to do this today, she took a deep breath. She was going to tell me all the reasons that why I couldn't and shouldn't do this. But before she had got a word out, I had said, yes, I'd love to do this. And there were two reasons why I could say yes so quickly. So one of them is that I have learned how to manage my inner critic and what she needs to hear. And the second is something that I say a lot in my resilience and training and coaching. When it comes to enhancing your resilience or silencing your inner critic or combating that imposter syndrome, you have everything that you need already. You don't need to have a certain IQ. You don't need to have a certain level of education. You don't need to have a particular personality type. You don't need to have your lucky pen in your pocket, and you don't even need money in your pocket. You don't need pharmaceuticals. You have everything you need. And you take it with you where you go. You don't leave it at home when you leave the house. You take it with you where you go. So let me show you some of the gifts that you have that will help you silence that negative voice that stops you from embracing opportunities and stops you from living life to the full and really stretching up into all you can be. So I'm going to get everyone listening here to show me your hand like this. So this is what we're going to use. Now, some of you are thinking now, that's great, Lisa, great idea. I need to give my inner critic a good slap. No, that's not what we're going to do today. There is a much better, kinder, more loving, more compassionate, and much more effective way to use this. So I'm going to show you now. So if you look at your hand as I'm speaking, if you look at your little finger, it's small, it's not very strong, it's not even self-sufficient. If you bend it, it takes its wingman with it for protection, the ring finger with it. So this represents the first of two inner critics that we have because it's quite vulnerable. When you think about it, when we were back when we were living in forests and caves, we actually were quite vulnerable. We don't have the tools for self-defense that other animals and species do. We don't have claws or fangs. We don't have thick fur or hides. We can't see in the dark. We have to live in groups because there's safety in groups, and that's why we're hardwired to fit in with our community and our peers. So to combat these deficits, our brains and bodies evolved to have a very heightened sense of danger. So a part of our brain is always on the lookout for danger. It's always alert, the result of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So what happens when it doesn't find life or death threats like in modern day? We don't usually have life or death threats every day. So when it doesn't see it, it makes stuff up. And it can't differentiate between real life and death danger or something like walking into a boardroom. So when we're walking into a boardroom, it's the same response we have. It's telling us, oh, careful here, you might die. Or if we're presenting to stakeholders or to investors, it's warning us that this is real danger that's imminent. So what it needs and what we can give it is reassurance. We can tell it everything is okay. I'm okay here. I belong here. Everything is okay. So when you're heading into a boardroom, you're saying, I belong here. I'm qualified to be here. The people at this table need to hear what I have to say because maybe I have insights that they don't have. So when you reassure it, it feels safe and it quietens down. So I'd like you to give your little finger a little hug and tell it that everything is okay. So the next finger along is our ring finger. Now this is a different animal altogether. It's bigger and stronger than your little finger. This is the inner critic that is repeating something that you've heard in the past in real life. So this is the sort of stuff like you're not good enough, you're never going to be good enough, or that's not for you, or you can't do that. It's a much louder voice in our head, and it might have embedded itself in our brains and set down roots there. It's a voice you've heard from somebody else, but bear in mind that what you have been hearing is likely somebody else's inner critic. So now think about that for a moment. It's bad enough that if you're listening to your own inner critic, but if somebody else's voice is telling you that you can't do something for whatever reason, that has to stop. If it's a voice that has caused you hurt or anger, then imagine what it was doing to the person who said it to you. And when we approach this voice with kindness and love and compassion, like we would with a small frightened child, that takes away all its power, and it's us regaining the power. We're taking the higher road here, and it's just us hoovering up all the power back again. And the good news is that we can retrain that voice, but it will take as much effort and repetition as we maybe have put into listening to the negative voice. Now, there are cognitive behavioural therapists and counsellors and hypnotherapists who are very highly skilled if you need specialist help with this. But I just want to do a demonstration to show you what is possible and give you hope of what's possible in terms of retraining your brain. So if you look at your screen, I'm going to show something to you and ask you what it is. So if I was to ask you colour and noun what this is, and it's not a trick question, you will agree that this is a red ball. You know for certain it's a red ball. There's nothing that I could say to you that would convince you that it's not a red ball. And you can't unlearn that that's a red ball. But when you were born, you didn't know that this was a red ball. So something happened between now and then that so that you know that this, for sure, that this is a red ball. So what happened was, when you were a baby or a small child, the first time that you heard or saw a red ball, two neurons in your brain came together. So they grew towards each other. They exchanged electricity and neurotransmitters and hormones, and then they reached each other, they bonded. And over time, every time that you were shown a red ball, or that you heard the words, and then you were throwing a red ball and catching it, every time that happened, that connection got much stronger. And then over time, the brain started to sort of think, well, this seems to be important information, we better remember this. So it wraps it in a fatty sleeping bag, for want of a better description, of fatty tissue that's called a myelin sheath, and that protects that connection for life. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't learn what a blue ball is. You learned what a blue ball is. It doesn't mean you can't learn what a yellow triangle is. That connection being so strongly embedded doesn't mean that you can't learn other things. Now, in fact, mathematicians debate on this, but they reckon that there are as many potential connections in our brain like that, like the red ball and the blue ball, as there are atoms in the universe. So I'll say that again, as many potential connections in our brain to learn something new as there are atoms in the universe. So it means that in 6 lifetimes, in 10 lifetimes, we could never utilize all the power that we have in our brain to learn something new. So in terms of positive thinking, if we repeat positive thoughts and affirmations to ourselves as regularly as we've heard the negative beliefs, we can override it. It doesn't take away the red ball, but it means that your brain sees the blue ball first. So it's absolutely possible to do that. And you can retrain. If you bend your ring finger, it's not a natural action that we do that. Probably if you play a musical instrument, you do that, but we have to train our finger to do that. In the same way, you can train that second voice to be quiet. So now I might have triggered some of you, and you're playing a little movie in your head. I might have triggered a stress response. So this is the perfect time to show you what the middle fingers is going to be used for in terms of stress response. So I'm going to get you to put it, we're going to use this to press a button in the middle of your body that soothes your stress response. So as I'm speaking, if you put your middle finger on your belly button, what you're going to do is take a deep breath in through your belly so that it pushes your finger outwards. And then as you're letting the breath out, you're letting it fall back into your spine. You don't use your shoulders at all. You're just using your belly to breathe and back to out and back in again. What this does, in the middle of your body is one of the busiest superhighways of nerves that we have in our body. It's called the vagus nerve, and it controls all the stuff that we don't have to think about, like digestion and heart rate and breathing. And when you have a stress response and your heart rate is rising, that's your vagus nerve in action. When you do this action with the breathing, it puts a pressure point on the exact point of your vagus nerve to soothe that down and calm down your racing heart. Now, that's the best way to do it. Belly breathing is what you might have been taught in yoga or Pilates, and you see newborn babies doing it on a changing mat. They do it really well. There are 2 other ways to press the button on the vagus nerve. They are gargling and opera singing. Now, usually not the most appropriate response when you're facing a challenge, although don't let me or any inner critic tell you that you can't opera sing if you're in a stressful situation. So fire on ahead, but remember that belly breathing, because nobody knows that you're doing it, they can't see that you're doing it. So next we have our index finger. And with this, we're going to search the index of the thesaurus of our mind to find different ways to describe what we're feeling when we're facing a challenge. So it's not fear, it's excitement. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. And when we label fears and feelings, it takes them from our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain just behind our forehead. So if you give it a little support there, that's where we do all our thinking and problem solving. When you label a feeling or an emotion, it pulls it back into a different part of our brain, into our hippocampus, where we manage our memories. And the brain knows then what to do with it. It processes it. It knows how to process something when you've applied a label to it. And it frees up your thinking brain then for creativity and innovation. So use your index finger to find different words, use different narratives, and to reassure and retrain those two hecklers that are at the back of your bus, the two inner critics. Now we have come to the strongest one, which is your thumb. And your thumb is the most agile digit that we have in our hand. So it controls the direction of what we're doing with our hand, and it gives it strength as well. So this actually represents your mindset. So think again about this, how this applies to maybe your business, your career, and what you're doing. Your mindset controls the direction of where you're going and gives you strength as well. And it's the most agile. And look what I'm doing with it. This is one of the most universally known hand signals that there is. And think about what this signifies. This signifies everything's okay. I'm good to go. I'm safe, and I can do that. So if you are presented with an opportunity and your inner critic is suddenly awake and your heart is starting to race, it's a sign. This is a sign that you're exactly where you need to be, because your body is releasing stress hormones to make you sharper and more focused. So all you can think about now is this thing in front of you, this opportunity in front of you, and that's your body doing that for you so that you can pay attention to it and have full focus. Your heart rate is rising because your brain needs all the oxygen it needs and all the thinking power that it can get. So you're at the edge of your comfort zone here. You're in your castle, which is strong and secure and safe, but a little bit constricting. And you're looking out at the moat, which represents your fear zone. And we don't know, the water's dark. We don't know if it's a foot deep or 20 feet deep. It's a bit uncertain. But on the other side of the moat, think about what's there. There is endless air and abundance of opportunity and possibility. So your stress response is a sign that you're exactly where you need to be and you're facing in the right direction. So certainly do your belly breathing if you need to soothe your stress response and make yourself feel more comfortable. But the next time you're presented with an opportunity that causes your body to react in the ways that I've described, so don't forget to reassure your inner critic, retrain that other person's voice, the other inner critic, press the button in the middle of your body to soothe your stress response, reframe your feelings with more positive labels, and then say, yes, I'm ready, I'm good to go, I can do that. So now I would like you to lean into the camera because it's something that I really want you to hear. So the next time that you're presented with an opportunity and your inner critic or someone else's voice says you can't do that, tell it it's wrong and then show it how wrong it is. Thanks for listening. I can't wait to hear what questions might have come in.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. That was superb. I was leaning into the camera there just at the end. I imagine listening to you, because I grapple with this myself, of when do you listen to your inner critic? When do you have to listen to actually the voice of reason and that kind of push and pull?
Yes, great question, and very important to know the difference. So your inner critic tends to speak in black and white. It tends to be very negative, and it always has a full stop at the end of its sentence. The voice of reason is more grey. It leaves the question open. The inner critic closes down the conversation, and the voice of reason keeps it open and says, yes, okay, well, you can't do that yet, but maybe you could, or you don't have that qualification to apply for that job yet, but maybe you could learn. So that's how you can tell the difference.
Great. And listening to you, I imagine a lot of people will empathise with, we find ourselves sometimes having to just learn hard lessons, but as you say, lean into them. What advice would you have for people today on just getting the learnings, even from those mistakes and hard times?
Well, if I can use an example that I went through, I thought when I set up my business that public speaking was my big challenge. And then one day the universe sent me another challenge that totally disregarded that. So I had organised a talk, a public talk, and I had booked a room, and I had my mum and my daughter were at the registration desk with a cash box and receipt books and everything. I'd advertised it widely, I'd booked a big room. And we were there, and it was crickets, tumbleweeds, nobody turned up. And you know, I am immersed in resilience. It hasn't happened since, but I'm immersed in resilience, so I was okay. But actually, the moment that I realised what was different, how I could really embrace that moment, was my daughter, who was 12 or 13 at the time. She was more upset for me than I was for myself. And I realised pretty quickly, this is a golden opportunity to demonstrate to her what resilience looks like in real life when life throws you a curveball. So in actual fact, the benefit of that was better than any hit to my pride. So sometimes these things are sent, and they definitely make us stronger. Definitely make us stronger.
Okay, well, look, with those very wise words, Lisa Nolan, and you can check out everything Lisa is talking about on her website at aslancoaching.ie. Say hello to Cartmel Cross in Monaghan for me. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.